My name is Harold Monroe, 66 years old. For 4 decades, I walked into the same factory gates in Detroit, wore the same badge, and believed the same lie, that loyalty would keep me safe. The night they called my retirement party, I realized how wrong I was. The banquet hall was dressed like a wedding. White linen, fake flowers, rented chandeliers casting golden light. A banner hung across the wall. "Thank you for your service, Hal." Everyone clapped, but no one looked me in the eye. Their smiles were stretched too tight, their applause just a little too quick. Then the new CEO, 38 years old, slick hair, custom suit, lifted his champagne glass. His voice carried like a dagger wrapped in velvet. "Hal's been with us for 40 years, a true pillar of the company, but every family needs to pass the torch. We need fresh blood, fresh ideas. Tonight we celebrate his legacy, and tomorrow we look forward." Laughter. Applause. But to me, every clap sounded like a nail sealing my coffin. They handed me a gold watch. Polished, heavy, too heavy. It wasn't a gift, it was a chain. A reminder, your time is done. I smiled, I nodded. I let them hug me, the same people who signed the papers to push me out. But inside, I was already planning, because that wasn't a retirement. That was a dismissal. And they had no idea the man they tried to bury was about to rise. They thought I'd disappear into silence. The day after my farewell, I did what every retired man in Detroit is supposed to do. I mowed the lawn. I sat on the porch swing with black coffee. I walked to the diner every Tuesday for pancakes and bacon. Neighbors waved, saying, "Hal, you earned your rest." And I let them believe it. I wore the mask of a man at peace. But peace was the last thing I felt. At night, when the streets were quiet and the porch light clicked off, I went down into my basement, my real retirement home, the workbench where I'd fixed engines for decades, the shelves stacked with grease-stained notebooks, the filing cabinet full of designs management laughed at, called too risky, too expensive, or my favorite, too outdated for a man your age. That's where the quiet years began. Down there, I wasn't retired. I was reborn. Every drawing, every blueprint I had shoved into a drawer, I pulled back out. Every failure the company mocked me for, I refined until it gleamed. And I wasn't alone. Old colleagues started showing up. Men and women they'd also forced out, people with gray in their hair but fire in their eyes. They brought donuts, thermoses of coffee, and their own stacks of forgotten ideas. We became a ghost crew, invisible to the world but alive in that basement. By day, I smiled and played the role of the harmless old man. By night, we hammered, soldered, calculated, tested. Sparks flew, metal bent. We built what the company was too blind to see, a future that didn't belong to them anymore. And for the first time in decades, I felt alive, because while they toasted my retirement, I was quietly building their replacement. Every night at that basement workbench, the past crept in. Not the good memories, not birthdays in the break room or fishing trips with coworkers. No, what haunted me were the boardrooms. I could still see myself years earlier, standing at the head of that long mahogany table, my hands shaking as I laid out blueprints for a new battery system, lighter, faster, capable of running cars for nearly 1,000 miles without a charge. The room was full of men in suits half my age. They leaned back, smirking, trading glances like schoolboys mocking the teacher. And then came the words that burned into me forever. The CEO, the same one who would later hand me that gold watch, said, "Hal, you've had a good run, but let's be real. EVs are a fad. This is the future of toys, not the future of cars, and frankly," he paused just long enough to twist the knife, "you're too old to be betting on the future anyway." The laughter that followed wasn't loud, it was worse. It was soft, pitying, like they were already lowering me into the grave. That night I went home, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at my father's old lunchbox. Steel dented, corners rusted, handle wrapped in electrical tape. He'd carried it every day of his life, just like I carried his name. He gave everything to the same company, and when he died, he left nothing but that box. I swore then and there. I would not die the same way. I would not hand them my legacy in silence. If they thought I was finished, they were about to see what an old man can build out of fire. That memory, that humiliation, wasn't my wound. It was my weapon. The basement was too small for what we were building. The sparks flew louder, the stacks of prototypes higher, until my wife finally said, "Hal, either move this out or blow up the whole house." So we moved, not to some glass skyscraper or fancy lab. We took over an abandoned warehouse on the east side of Detroit. Broken windows, graffiti on the walls, pigeons in the rafters. To anyone else, it was a ruin. To us, it was a battlefield. We scrubbed the floors, patched the leaks, and set up long rows of workbenches. Night after night, the ghost crew gathered. Some were in their 60s, some in their 70s. And then the young ones started coming, kids who had been laughed out of interviews, engineers the big firms called too inexperienced. They called me coach, not boss, not CEO. Coach, and I coached them the only way I knew how, the way my father once taught me on the factory floor. Work with your hands, build with your brain, and never let anyone tell you you're too old or too young to matter. Months blurred together. We slept on cots beside the machines, ate cold pizza over blueprints, tested batteries until they smoked and burst, then built them again stronger. And then one night it happened. The prototype held. A car engine roared to life, powered by a battery no one else in the industry had ever seen, one that could run 1,000 miles on a single charge. We didn't cheer. We didn't celebrate. We stood in silence, staring at the glow of the dashboard, each of us knowing we had just built something they said was impossible. Investors started calling. Journalists started whispering. And across town, the company that threw me away was cracking under lawsuits, falling stocks, and angry shareholders. They thought I was retired. But I was just getting ready for the real work. The kind of work that ends careers and takes back legacies. The boardroom smelled the same as it had 40 years ago, leather chairs, polished wood, and a hint of arrogance in the air. I walked in quietly, a plain gray suit on my back, nothing flashy. My lawyer followed behind me, carrying a single black folder. The CEO, the same slick-haired kid who once handed me that gold watch, leaned back in his chair with a smirk. "Hal, well, this is a surprise. Come to reminisce, or maybe give us advice on how to handle the future." The board chuckled. That same soft, pitiful laugh I'd heard years ago. I didn't sit. I placed the folder on the table and slid it across. No speech, no smile, just silence. The CEO flipped it open, his smirk cracked. His face drained pale as he read the numbers, the signatures, the seals. His hand actually trembled. He looked up at me, voice shaking. This isn't possible." I leaned forward, my voice steady. "You told me to retire, so I did, from being your employee, but I never retired from the future, and now..." I tapped the papers with one finger. "I own 51% of this company." The room froze. Some board members gasped, others pushed back their chairs, whispering in disbelief. The CEO tried to laugh it off, but his throat caught. You bought us out, with what money?" I straightened my jacket. "With the patents you threw away. With the investors who believed in the ideas you called a fad, and with interest, gentlemen." Silence, heavy, suffocating. I finally sat down at the head of the table. My chair, my place. And for the first time in decades, I didn't feel like the old man in the room. I felt like the future. The factory gates that once closed on me opened again. But this time, they didn't creak for executives in shiny suits. They opened for the people who had been left behind. The first morning, I stood in the doorway of the old plant, the sunrise catching on the steel beams. Workers streamed in, some young, some gray-haired, some veterans who thought no one would hire them again. They carried lunch boxes, tool belts, and something I hadn't seen in years, hope. We cleaned the dust off machines. We replaced rust with fire. And when the first line of new battery-powered cars rolled out, the entire floor erupted in cheers. Not polite claps, not forced applause, real pride. One of the young engineers, barely 22, the kind of kid my old bosses would have tossed aside, turned to me and said, "Coach, you didn't just build a company. You built a place for people like us." I smiled, but not wide, not boastful, just enough to let him know he was right. Across town, the old CEO's name was fading from headlines, replaced by ours. And that gold watch they once gave me, it sits on my desk, not as a chain anymore, but as a reminder. They tried to measure my time. They forgot I owned it. As I looked out across the plant, sparks flying, engines humming, people alive with purpose, I finally spoke the words I had carried for years. They thought I was finished, but some of us aren't built to fade away quietly. We're built to build legacies.